The year 1956 was not remembered for speeches, treaties, or parades. It was remembered in silence. It was a year when the Cold War stopped being an abstract political rivalry and became something far more dangerous, a constant, invisible presence hanging over every radar screen, every bomber crew, and every decision made in the shadows. The world did not know it at the time, but humanity was learning how fragile peace truly was. And on one frozen day above the Arctic Circle, that fragility would rest not on presidents or generals, but on a single aircraft drifting just a little too far off course. At the center of this silent struggle stood the Strategic Air Command, known simply as SAC. Under the iron will of General Curtis LeMay, SAC lived by one doctrine: readiness at all costs. Its bombers were armed, fueled, and prepared to launch at a moment's notice, 24 hours a day. But not every mission involved nuclear bombs. Some missions were quieter, more dangerous in their own way. These were the reconnaissance flights, missions designed to provoke, observe, and disappear before anyone could react. The aircraft chosen for this task was the RB-47 Stratojet, a sleek, six-engine jet that looked fast even when standing still. It was not a bomber that destroyed cities. It was a listener, a spy, a machine designed to fly close enough to the Soviet Union to make their defenses reveal themselves. These missions were known as ferret flights. Their purpose was simple in theory and terrifying in practice. Fly near Soviet airspace. Force their radar operators to activate their systems. Record every signal, every pulse, every frequency. Map the invisible shield that protected the Soviet homeland. There were no satellites to do this work in 1956. There was only aluminum, fuel, human intuition, and courage. The men who flew these missions understood that a single mistake, one wrong wind calculation, one navigational error, could turn a reconnaissance flight into an international incident. Captain Hal Austin understood this better than most. He was not reckless, and he was not arrogant. He was precise, calm, a pilot who trusted his training and respected the limits of both man and machine. On this mission, launching from the frozen isolation of Thule Air Base in Greenland, his target was the Siberian coastline. The region was among the most sensitive in the Soviet Union, packed with naval installations, radar stations, and interceptor bases designed to stop American bombers long before they could reach Moscow. The RB-47 climbed to 40,000 feet, slicing through thin Arctic air, while the sun reflected off endless ice below. There were no landmarks, no roads, no cities, just white and silence. Navigation in that world was closer to 19th century seamanship than modern aviation. The navigator relied on a sextant, measuring the stars through a small overhead window, calculating position by hand while compensating for wind drift. But the Arctic jet stream was unpredictable, poorly understood, invisible, and that night it shifted, slowly at first, then with force. While the crew focused on their electronic sensors, while oscilloscopes flickered and recorders hummed, the aircraft was being pushed eastward, mile by mile, into territory no American aircraft was ever meant to enter. The mistake announced itself without sound. No alarm, no warning light, just a sudden change on the electronic warfare officer's screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. These were not long-range search radars. These were fire control radars, fast, precise, designed to guide weapons. The Soviets were no longer watching. They were targeting. At that exact moment, on the ground below, Soviet controllers realized what was happening. An American jet was deep inside their airspace. Not 5 miles, not 10, 50 miles. Orders were issued immediately. Interceptors scrambled. The hunt began. The MiG-17 was built for this exact moment. Light, agile, armed with heavy cannons capable of tearing apart bomber formations. As the Soviet pilots climbed, they spotted the silver streak of the RB-47 against the dark blue sky. For Captain Austin, the first sign of danger was visual, a brief flash of sunlight off a canopy where no aircraft should be. Then another, and another. Suddenly they were surrounded. The cockpit became a crucible of pressure. Alarms blared. The aircraft shook as Austin pushed the engines toward their limits. The RB-47 entered the coffin corner, where the margin between stalling and tearing itself apart was razor-thin. The tail gunner locked onto the pursuing fighters, his finger resting on the trigger, waiting for permission that never came. Tracer rounds flashed past the cockpit. One shell ripped into the wing, metal tearing like paper. Yet Austin did not fire back. He knew the truth that history often forgets. Sometimes the most dangerous trigger is the one you pull. If an American gun killed a Soviet pilot over Soviet soil, there would be no apology fast enough to stop what followed. Retaliation, escalation, nuclear alerts. Austin chose restraint. He chose speed. He traded altitude for momentum, forcing the MiGs to fight physics as much as his aircraft. For 20 minutes, the sky was a battlefield without borders, a place where one mistake could end the world. Fuel began to decide the outcome. The MiGs, built for short, brutal interceptions, were running out. One by one, they peeled away. The last stayed until the border itself, firing one final burst before breaking off. Only then did Austin allow himself to breathe. Only then did the engines ease back. The ocean appeared beneath them like salvation. They landed in Alaska damaged, exhausted, and alive. The story they told was never meant to be told. Intelligence officers erased it from existence. Logs confiscated. Orders issued. Silence enforced. For decades, the world never knew how close it came to disaster because of a wind current and a line crossed without intent. Only years later, when archives opened and empires fell, did the truth emerge. The 50-mile mistake was not a failure of navigation. It was a triumph of restraint, a reminder that during the Cold War, survival did not always depend on strength, but on judgment, on the courage to not fire, on the humility to accept uncertainty. History often celebrates the men who act. Rarely does it honor the men who choose not to. But on that frozen day in 1956, the world was saved not by missiles, but by restraint, discipline, and the quiet decision to fly home.